Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told This podcast.
Great to be diving into another story.
Today, we're tackling a real-life enigma, truly a head-scratcher. It's a mystery that started on a German Autobahn back in 1984, and, well, it's kept people guessing for decades. We're talking about the very strange case of Günther Stoll. You might have heard it called the Autobahn Riddle, or maybe the YOG'TZE case.
That name definitely sticks with you, and it's a story that really pulls you in from the very beginning.
It really does.
You've got Günther Stoll, who seems like a pretty ordinary guy on the surface, an unemployed food engineer. But then this deep sense of unease starts creeping in.
Yeah, paranoia, right. He becomes convinced these unknown individuals are after him. It feels like the start of a thriller novel.
Absolutely. And it culminates in this really dramatic moment at home. Picture it. Late October the 25th, 1984. He's there with his wife, presumably talking about these fears.
And then apparently, completely out of the blue, he just bursts out with, "Now I've got it."
Like a sudden revelation.
Exactly. And then comes the part that gives the case its name. He grabs some paper, scribbles down YOG'TZE.
Or possibly YO6TZE. That detail becomes important later.
Right, that G or 6 is a whole thing. But almost as soon as he writes it down, he crosses it all out. Just like that.
Gone. Scratched out immediately.
And that bizarre little sequence, that cryptic note written and then instantly destroyed, that's really the ignition point for our deep dive today.
It's such a potent image, isn't it? That scrap of paper. Suggests the thought so important he had to write it down, but then maybe too dangerous? Or maybe just wrong. He rejects it instantly.
What could it have meant? And why cross it out? It's baffling from the get-go.
And the night just gets stranger from there.
Oh, yeah. So shortly after this scribbling incident, he leaves the house. He heads to his usual spot, a pub called Papillon in a nearby town, Wilmsdorf.
Just goes for a beer, like any other night.
Seems like it. Orders a beer, but then while he's there, he just collapses.
Yeah.
Faints, falls right off his stool, hits his face.
And crucially, witnesses said he wasn't drunk. He'd only just ordered the beer.
Right. That detail always gets me. He wasn't intoxicated. He just lost consciousness. It's so abrupt, so out of place.
It really highlights the internal pressure he must have been under, doesn't it? I mean, healthy people don't typically just collapse like that without cause.
No. It speaks volumes about his mental state, that intense stress he was feeling.
So he eventually comes to, leaves the pub, gets back in his VW Golf.
And drives off. Now, there's a bit of a gap here in the timeline, about 2 hours where his movements aren't fully accounted for. But around 1 a.m., now early morning, October 26th, he shows up unexpectedly in Hagerseelbach. This is his childhood hometown.
Okay.
And he tracks down a woman he knew growing up, someone from his past. And he tells her something deeply unsettling.
What was that?
He warns her. He says something like, a horrible incident is about to happen that very night.
Wow. Imagine hearing that from someone in the middle of the night. Chilling. Absolutely chilling.
Right. I mean, what do you even say to that? Her reaction was apparently quite normal, suggesting he go talk to his parents.
A natural response. Trying to ground him, maybe?
Seems like it. But he refuses. Says they wouldn't understand. It paints this picture of him being completely isolated in his fear, convinced this terrible thing was coming that only he knew about.
Utterly alone with this premonition.
He does eventually seem to agree with her suggestion to just go home to his wife back in Anshausen. He gets in his car, drives away again.
But he never gets there.
No, he never makes it home. Fast forward about 2 hours. It's roughly 3 a.m. We're on the A45 Autobahn near the Hagen Süd exit. 2 truck drivers are on the road.
And they find something disturbing.
They find Stoll's VW Golf. It's wrecked down in a ditch or a trench beside the highway.
A grim discovery, certainly. A car crash in the dead of night.
But God, here's where it takes another sharp turn into the bizarre. Both truck drivers, independently, reported seeing someone else near the wreck.
Oh.
An injured man, wearing a white jacket, standing near the vehicle.
Both saw this. A man in a white jacket. That's specific.
Very specific. 2 separate witnesses. Who was this person? What were they doing there? Injured how? It immediately complicates things.
It really does. That consistency is hard to ignore. It throws a huge question mark over any simple accident theory right away.
So the truckers, they do the right thing. They call the authorities. Then they go closer to the car to check on the driver.
And they find Günther Stoll inside.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's naked, completely undressed, and severely injured. Naked. But incredibly, despite his injuries, he's still conscious. Barely.
And he manages to say something.
He does. His perplexing last words.
Yo!
He tells the truck drivers that there were 4 other men with him in the car.
4 men.
4 male persons, he apparently said.
Mm.
And that they had run off, fled the scene.
Okay.
The truckers asked him, were they friends of yours?
Oh.
He said, no, not friends. And then, well, tragically, he died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
So let me get this straight. A wrecked car. The driver's naked, dying. He claims 4 unknown men were with him and fled. And 2 witnesses saw another injured man in a white jacket nearby.
That's the scene. It's just chaos.
Yeah.
A cascade of contradictions and deeply strange details, like a puzzle box just shattered on the floor.
It screams foul play, doesn't it? Or at least something far more complex than just a car losing control.
Absolutely. So our mission, our deep dive here, is to try and piece together what we actually know. We need to look at how investigators initially approached this, why it became such an enduring mystery, and then touch on the very recent developments. The case was actually closed just this year, April 2025.
It's quite a journey, sifting through the fragments, trying to build a picture from a real mess of confusing clues.
Exactly. And look, if you're finding this dive into the YOGTZE case compelling, and honestly, how could you not?
Right.
Make sure you hit that subscribe button for Tell Me More. We explore stories like this all the time, and you won't want to miss what's coming up next.
Definitely subscribe. Okay, so the initial investigation. How did they tackle this scene?
Well, faced with that scenario, injured man, wrecked car, the police initially leaned towards a hit and run. That seemed to be the working theory at first.
Okay, that makes some sense on the surface, the idea being he was hit by another vehicle somewhere else.
Right. The thinking was maybe he was hit as a pedestrian, or maybe his car was involved in an incident elsewhere. Then somehow he was put back into his own car.
And the car was driven or maybe rolled to the spot where the truckers found it.
Exactly. That was the initial line of reasoning. It seemed perhaps the most straightforward way to account for him being injured before the car ended up in the ditch.
But that theory started to run into problems pretty quickly, didn't it?
It did. Big problems. The first major one was the damage to the car itself, the VW Golf.
What about it?
When forensic experts examined it, the damage just didn't seem severe enough. It didn't match the catastrophic injuries Günther Stoll had suffered.
Ugh. So the car looked like it had been in, say, a minor collision or went off the road, but his injuries looked like something much, much worse had happened to him personally.
Precisely. The physics didn't quite line up. It suggested the main trauma didn't happen inside that car at that location.
Which would seem to support the injured elsewhere idea, but...
But then you have the nakedness. That's the huge, bizarre sticking point. If he was injured in a hit and run elsewhere, why on earth would someone undress him before putting him back in his car and moving it?
It makes no sense. It adds this layer of almost ritualistic strangeness that defies any logical explanation within a standard hit-and-run framework.
Totally. Were his clothes removed before he was injured? After?
Yeah.
Why? The hit-and-run theory just couldn't account for that at all. It pointed towards something far weirder.
And then there are the eyewitnesses. You can't just dismiss the truck drivers.
No, absolutely not. They both saw that injured man in the white jacket near the exit. Police searched the area, but found no trace of him, never identified.
Who was he? Was he connected to Stoll? Was he one of the supposed 4 men Stoll mentioned?
Or someone else entirely. He remains this complete ghost in the narrative, a persistent loose thread.
And wasn't there also a report of a hitchhiker seen near that same exit around that time?
Yes. Another potential person in the vicinity. Could they be connected to the man in the white jacket? To Stoll? We just don't know. It's like trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing and a few extra pieces from a different puzzle thrown in.
It really paints a chaotic picture. The white jacket man, the potential hitchhiker, the 4 mystery men mentioned by Stoll, Stoll himself naked and dying.
And hanging over all of it, the ghost of that note. YOG'TZE.
Ah, yes, the note. Or the lack thereof. The fact that his wife only mentioned it months later is significant.
And that she threw it away that same night. It raises questions, doesn't it? Why wait so long to mention it? Why throw away something potentially so important immediately?
It certainly clouds the issue. It means we don't have the physical evidence. We're relying on her memory months after the fact of what he scribbled down and instantly crossed out.
Which is why that uncertainty about the G versus the 6 persists. Did she remember it perfectly? Could it have been something else entirely?
That ambiguity is crucial. YOGTZE versus YO6TZE could point in completely different directions, assuming it pointed anywhere at all.
It's incredibly frustrating from an investigative standpoint. This thing that seems like it should be a key clue, but it's gone, and its exact form is uncertain.
Absolutely. It introduces this fundamental doubt right at the core of the mystery. Was it a name, a code, a place, or just gibberish born from paranoia?
Well, the story of the note took another twist about a year later, didn't it? After the case was featured on TV.
Yes, on Aktenzeichen XY Ungelust, a very famous German true crime show. That broadcast brought forward some interesting, if ultimately inconclusive, information.
Amateur radio enthusiast, right?
Exactly. Ham radio operators, they watched the program, heard about the note, and they came up with a theory.
What was it?
They suggested that if you take YOG'TZE and swap the G for a 6, you get YO6TZE.
Okay.
And according to the YO6TZE, could plausibly be the call sign for a Romanian amateur radio station.
Romania. A Romanian radio call sign. How does that fit in?
Well, that was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? It's one of those details that just makes you pause. Is it a completely random coincidence? Or is there some hidden connection between Günther Stoll and Romania or amateur radio that nobody knew about?
It seems so out of left field.
Oh, yeah.
Did anything ever come of that lead?
Unfortunately, no. Despite the intrigue, investigators could never establish any concrete link. No evidence Stoll had ties to Romania, no indication he was involved in amateur radio. It just remained this tantalizing but ultimately dead end.
So another puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit anywhere?
Pretty much. And so for decades, that's where the case sat. A collection of deeply unsettling facts, eyewitness accounts that couldn't be fully reconciled, that cryptic note, and no clear answers. It truly earned its name as the Autobahn Riddle.
Until very recently, April 2025. News breaks that the Hagen police have revisited the case.
Yes. Using modern forensic techniques, things that just weren't possible back in 1984. And this led to a major reevaluation.
What did they find with these new methods? What changed the picture so dramatically after almost 40 years?
Two main things, really. First, they took a fresh look at the autopsy reports and all the medical evidence regarding Stoll's injuries.
Okay.
Modern analysis suggested his injuries were actually more consistent with being inside a vehicle during a crash rather than being hit outside it, like in a classic hit and run. The pattern of trauma matched forces experienced within a car during a collision.
Ah, so that cast doubt on the injured elsewhere theory that seemed necessary before.
Precisely. It started to shift the perspective back towards the crash scene itself being the primary event. But the second finding was perhaps even more definitive.
What was that?
DNA. They conducted a thorough forensic re-examination of the inside of Stoll's VW Golf using modern, highly sensitive DNA analysis. They found no trace evidence, no DNA belonging to anyone other than Günther Stoll himself inside that car. None.
Wow. That's pretty conclusive, isn't it?
It's very powerful evidence. The complete lack of any foreign DNA strongly contradicts Stoll's dying words about 4 other men being in the car with him.
So if he was alone, and his injuries could be explained by the crash itself.
Then the simplest explanation becomes the most likely. Based on the reanalyzed medical evidence and the definitive lack of anyone else's DNA in the car, the authorities concluded that Günther Stoll died as a result of a single-car traffic accident.
No outside interference, no foul play.
No evidence to support it, according to the final police report. They officially closed the case, classifying it as a tragic accident.
So after decades as a potential murder mystery, the YOG'TZE case is now officially resolved as just an accident. How has that conclusion been received? It feels a bit flat after all the weirdness.
Well, flat is probably a good word for how many feel. While it provides an official answer, it leaves so many of the surrounding circumstances completely unexplained, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What about his paranoia? Why did he think people were after him? What was the horrible incident he predicted?
Exactly. And the collapse in the pub, the sudden "now I've got it" moment. None of that fits neatly into a "he just crashed his car" narrative.
And YOG'TZE. What about YOG'TZE? Does the official conclusion just dismiss it as irrelevant now?
Essentially, yes. Given the uncertainty about what was actually written and the lack of any corroborating evidence for its significance, the authorities seem to view it as likely a product of his disturbed mental state at the time, perhaps paranoia-fueled, perhaps just confusion.
But it's hard to just let it go, isn't it? It felt so central to the mystery for so long.
It did. It became the symbol of the case's enigma. But for those who followed the story, just writing it off feels unsatisfying. Even if it was just a delusion, it was part of his final hours.
So the official book is closed. Single car accident. But it still leaves us wondering. Could his paranoia have somehow caused the accident? Was he driving erratically because he thought he was being followed?
That's a plausible psychological factor, certainly. Extreme stress and paranoia can definitely impair driving.
In his dying words, about the foreman. Delirium from the injuries. Hallucination.
That also seems plausible. Head trauma, shock, severe pain. They can all cause confusion, disorientation, even false memories or perceptions in the immediate aftermath. His account might simply not have reflected reality due to his condition.
It feels like we have an official answer, but the story itself remains deeply unsettling. The sheer weight of strangeness leading up to that crash. It makes the simple accident conclusion feel incomplete somehow.
I think that's fair. The legal case may be closed, but the human mystery lingers. The sequence of events was just so bizarre. It ensures that Günther Stoll's story, the YOG'TZE case, will probably continue to fascinate people drawn to these kinds of persistent, unsettling puzzles.
Indeed. While the authorities have reached their verdict, we're left contemplating the man at the center of it all. What was really going on inside Günther Stoll's mind during those last days and hours?
That internal struggle, his fear, his apparent premonition, those elements remain deeply compelling, even if the final event was determined to be an accident.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the truly perplexing YOGTZE case. We hope you found it as intriguing as we do.
It's a case that certainly sticks with you.
And remember, if you enjoy exploring these kinds of stories, hit that subscribe button for Tell Me More so you don't miss our future deep dives. As you go about your day, maybe ponder this. What do you think was happening with Günther Stoll? Does the official conclusion satisfy you, or do you think there are still unanswered questions lurking in the shadows of that German Autobahn? Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't just the how, but the why behind his final troubled hours.